Welcome to this week's interview with the CIPR Sports Group. I'm Rebecca Roberts, and with me is Abby Burton, also from the Sports Network, and our guest this week is Heather McCormick, Group Communications and Public Affairs Director at London Marathon. Heather, you'll make a much better intro yourself than me. Tell us a little bit about your career to date leading up to you joining the London Marathon earlier this year.
Hi, both of you. It's lovely to be here. I joined the London Marathon. It's London Marathon Events. I joined in September last year. Prior to that, I was communications director at the Guardian Media Group. So it's been a really interesting career I've had. I've never been bored, I've got to say. My journey in sport started across the 2012 games when I was head of comms for the eSport Trust. So I've come full circle. I've come back to sport now. But it's been a really interesting and varied career across some very famous people and brands in the media and the charity sphere before coming back to sport. So I worked for the eSport Trust as a head of comms, as I said, and then I segued into the charity sector where I worked for Lumos, which is J.K. Rowling's children's charity, as Director of Marketing and Communications. And then after that experience, I was recruited to work for the Elton John AIDS Foundation. So I had an incredible time during his last world tour working for the foundation. And then after that, I was recruited by The Guardian. So it's been really interesting, I must say, moving sectors. But coming back to sport feels totally right.
Well, yeah, as you say, Heather, that is definitely interesting and varied. You've done everything from grassroots to school sport, to high-profile charity and to major brand communications. How does the London Marathon combine like all of those experiences with such a broad public offering alongside corporate partnerships and the elite side of things?
Yeah, I feel really lucky. My career has been so rewarding, but I have to say have gone for these opportunities because I did want the variety. And when I saw this role for London Marathon Events, it did feel like the perfect amalgamation of that sport experience, the high profile press, and the brand exposure. So it did feel like a good combination. I think purpose is very important to me. London Marathon Events is a social impact organisation at its core. Our mission is to inspire activity. So one of the biggest draws for me is making that positive impact on the lives of particularly children and young people. I started my career at the eSport Trust, and I think bringing them into a journey of lifelong activity is a real passion of mine. And it's a virtuous circle at London Marathon Events because all of the surplus profits of the highly successful TCS London Marathon, all the events we run, go to the London Marathon Foundation, which funds sport and activity projects across the UK for underserved communities. So, it's been a really good combination of previous areas of interest and expertise. So we've got a business here where every layer of sport and society intersect, I would say, because that's what makes it such a unique communications challenge, but also an opportunity. You've got the mass movement, public health narrative, you've got the charity fundraising engine, you've got that, international press and elite competition element. You've also got that commercial partnerships ecosystem. So I think my background across comms and marketing and sport and global charities, and then the media brand of The Guardian, that's provided that really great grounding to drive forward our communications now. I think it's almost surprised me how huge and broad the network of stakeholders and audiences are that we intersect with as a business. So yeah, the challenge is creating that coherent narrative that really brings in that inclusivity of the event. I think that's really interesting, but also what we're trying to do is still deliver that precision and professionalism that's expected at this elite and this corporate level. So yeah, it's a unique and very interesting challenge.
You touched on it a little bit there, and also talked about purpose, but how has it been sort of coming back into the sports communications role? And how do you feel these other experiences kind of help broaden that skill set as a communications professional?
been, it's felt really natural. I think if you go out of something and come back into it, after, what has it been, probably nearly 15 years, I feel like I've got this much broader lens and experience. I sit on the executive leadership team, so I'm also responsible for driving the business to further success and making it a really great place to work for our colleagues. And I think working in those different sectors has really sharpened my understanding of the stakeholder management. I think it's a huge part of work and communications that we need to deliver. You've got the stakeholder management piece. I think that's really vital in my current role. And that whole brand storytelling piece, and then the reputation management piece, which was, in my career, was really shaped by my past roles at The Guardian and at the Elton John AIDS Foundation. So what's been great about coming back into it is it covers so many areas. You've got health, you've got community, you've got culture, and I think those experiences I've had outside sport have strengthened my ability to navigate that broad landscape that we sit across. So I think it's taught me really, having worked for the brands and people at the top of their game, and now coming to the #1 marathon brand, it's taught me that you can always push to be better. Everything, working for some famous people, and everything always has to be at the very top of what you can achieve. So I think that was a wonderful experience in terms of knowing that you can always push to be better in communications. And I think working at The Guardian, of course, that top global media brand, gave me that insight and that commercial experience that I needed. And that really combines well in my current role. It makes me more strategic, and it makes me able to contribute to our commercial priorities. So, yeah, I think these past experiences have made me a more rounded communicator and probably a better member of the ELT, because what we're looking at all the time is the future as a business.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think it shows, we've got comms in our title or whatever, but there's so much more to it than just one aspect of comms. It's so broad and wide-reaching what we do.
Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned there, Heather, London is one of the most well-established marathons in the world. And then on top of that, there's the rise of, running clubs and just a general growth in running, which has seen entries and interest grow even more, to the extent that for the first time, I think I'm right in saying, the London Marathon is expanding to 2 days. So I'd be really interested to hear more about that from a communications perspective, the opportunities that you've got that come with that, but also, of course, the challenges that follow.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this now, but I have to caveat this with, we are still discussing the potential for a one-off 2-day event. So, of course, it's been discussed with stakeholders across London for months and months and months. We really do want it to go ahead, of course, because if it does go ahead, it would be a milestone moment. From a communications perspective, I mean, wow, what a huge opportunity and a challenge. I'm so excited about the prospects. So we are, of course, hoping we will go ahead. But I think the thing is, we've seen this huge rise, haven't we, in the popularity of running. And since COVID, I would say, it's 1.3 million people have applied for the ballot for the 27 event, which is mind-blowing, really. If the doubles agreed, it would provide many more opportunities for people to participate, which I think is what we're trying to do as a business. We're trying to inspire activity. We're seeing this huge growth of women and young people in that ballot entry as well, which is really interesting for us as communicators. And I think our opportunity, if it does go ahead, is to grow our positioning, because we want to be more inclusive than ever. We want to welcome more runners, we want to tell more stories. And a big part of our work is that deepening engagement with communities. So, this will give us more space, to spotlight more partners, more charities. And I think what's really interesting about the potential for a 2-day marathon is the elite field, because, everything's competing for attention in one day at the moment. And what would be wonderful is for us to be able to focus on having perhaps the women's elite event on one day and the men's another day. So we'd be able to really elevate women's sport, give the women's event much more focus. But of course, the challenge of this a very ambitious project is that the marathons are really deeply loved national treasure. So any evolution needs to be really communicated really carefully, of course, because we rely and want to bring London with us. We need to bring, you know, a huge range of audiences with us on the journey to make this a success if it does get approved. So, you know, you've got the boroughs, the residents, the participants, volunteers, broadcasters. You know, it's about preserving that magic, isn't it, and expanding the reach. So it's a totally unique, very exciting prospect. So we're very hopeful, you know, that it could go ahead.
You seem to always love a challenge in your career choices, Heather.
I know. There's a theme, but you know what? I think this is what's made me really, as a career, it's been really interesting. As I said previously, you know, it's really about pushing all the time. And I think that's what we need to do in comms now. I think each experience has taught me that you can push things further. But with something as beloved as the marathon, you know, we know it's hugely positive to do this in terms of economic impact for London, the UK, in terms of like happiness. We've got research on happiness around people even supporting the marathon leave like 80% happier. You know, it's a huge thing for fundraising. But you know, also it's all about, you know, ensuring the enjoyment of the participants. That's what we do it for.
I was just wondering, obviously there's loads of priorities on, I guess you call it on a race day or on event day, I'm not sure what the terminology is. How do you
marathon day we call it.
Okay, how do you prioritize what you're going to focus on and what you're going to, you know, amplify?
Well, that's what's been fascinating for me coming into this role. This team here are incredible. So it's a huge operation running it's the world's biggest event, you know, one-day event. So, you know, I did come into this first event I've just done with some trepidation, of course. You know, in terms of my team, I've got a team of, and it's a small team of operational experts delivering media events. They're amazing, you know, sport experts. So we have extremely well planned, defined roles. And it enables us all to really focus. And of course, the unexpected happens on event days. So in terms of priorities, we do have to really be clear on what we're delivering. And mine is a combination of different things, but it also includes, if you think about the practicalities of an event, with you know, this year was a world record, nearly 60,000 people. It's all about safety. You know, for us, it's the participant experience at its heart is the most important thing, because I also oversee customer engagement, so customer services for the group. So ours is about ensuring those participants have a really safe, fun, fabulous experience that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. So some of my work involves on marathon day, incident communications, you know, coordinating with all the London services. We've got a big team doing it, but I've got a role in that as well, to make sure that, you know, communications channels run effectively on marathon day as well. So it's multifaceted. You know, you've got so many different aspects of it. You've got I've got a fabulous head of comms who leads on like the elites. We've got the press conferences that are happening with those elites. We've got, you know, all the communications going out for all the participants. We've got the charity partners, and of course the participants themselves who are telling their own stories and having that experience. So yeah, it was a really wonderful, you know, being a piece of a huge puzzle of all my colleagues on marathon day. But yeah, in terms of priorities, it's really clearly planned and set because of you know, you are ultimately dealing with a huge event which has, you know, almost 60,000 people taking part in it.
I was just wondering, like, because it's a one-day event, how do you make sure there's sort of comms momentum throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, so we London Marathon Events actually owns quite a lot of different events. So that's one of our challenges. I'm sure your network would have thoughts on this. One of our challenges with, you know, having that wonderful London Marathon on our title, we have a multitude of other events we run. So we are currently preparing for the Big Half and Swim Serpentine, the Vitality 10K, and then the Royal Parks which will happen in the autumn season. And prior to the London Marathon, we delivered the Brighton Marathon, the back half. And we've just acquired our first international business. So we've just acquired the organisers of the Frankfurt Marathon, which is really exciting. So we've got an international strategy, bringing the expertise of London Marathon into other places in the world. And also we want to bring that social impact that we've created to other events as well. So it's, yes, of course, London Marathon is our flagship event, but the rest of the year is spent working on with all our subsidiaries that we work with to deliver a whole host of other events and impact in where they're based. So it's generally quite, while we're focusing on celebrating our success at the moment with all our colleagues and having that pause, we're also focused on all the other events we have to deliver. So yeah, there's never a dull moment.
I was really interested on like how has London Marathon, like a lot of other charities, embraced sort of the rise of the influencer and use of digital to enhance its story and experience, because you couldn't move at all that week for people talking about it. And people do like to say they've done a marathon, but documenting it and kind of growing that reach has kind of been something I guess you have to kind of get on top of.
Yeah, and again, we've got a team of people who are brilliant at this. We, that delivery on Marathon Day is a massive effort. Across all the platforms. I mean, of course, it's transformed how the story is told. It's that deeply human experience of the challenge of the event, and so social media, it's perfect for it. We're able to create that shared experience, and so that really works well in terms of that inspiration, that resilience, and then the music and the brands we work with and our sponsors and our commercial partners. I mean, it's a unique challenge in the sense of it's like a hugely noisy time. How do you get cut through? Something we're always trying to work on. But those influencers, of course, really important to us. Those running creators, the brand ambassadors, the participants themselves, the elite athletes. I mean, they all play that significant role in reaching audiences that traditional channels can't. So they're a channel in themselves, aren't they? That's how I see it. So we've shifted over time from that, it would appear, from that more traditional model to more participatory one. But I feel like there's so much more we can do, in terms of building that year-round engagement. And it's changing all the time, isn't it? Working with, I think there's something around, because I lead on participant communications as well, and we're really trying to take that next step, the next level up in and that amazing experience for everybody who takes part in our events. But I really do feel there's something around, the way people get all their information from social media now, don't they? We've really seen that, particularly amongst younger audiences. So it's about seeding out trustworthy information with knowledgeable influencers. I think there's probably a really big piece of work we can do there for next year's event, because that's where people are getting their information from, and misinformation from is a challenge. So I think we need to do much more on all platforms with influencers.
Yeah, and on that point, I think what's really interesting, you're talking about customer service, how people document the whole getting their kit, seeing their name on the board, like that whole, it's almost like, and I was talking to someone the other day about fandoms, it's like in football, sort of 90% of the kind of culture is kind of outside of the actual match. And whilst obviously the marathon is like the pinnacle, the winter training, everything else, there's such an opportunity there, but such a scope and a conversation already happening prior to the event.
There is, isn't there? It's such an endeavour, this, isn't it? I'm just in awe of anybody who can do it. I really am. I'm surrounded by incredibly passionate runners, of course, working here. But I think there's a whole, and that's the growth in running itself, and the growth in challenging ourselves. This is a whole movement, isn't it? So it's ever evolving. I don't pretend to know it all at all. I've got a lot of great people in the team who are brilliant at this stuff, but I think equally it's this sort of it's like a woven fabric of different voices, isn't it? But how do we do that to make the information really accurate as well? Because obviously it's really important to ensure participants are really have all the information about the weather, accurate, how to hydrate properly, ensuring they're using the right information, not using things they might have read or picked up along the way, just making sure we're providing the information it's getting to them. I think that is actually quite a challenge in a very noisy multimedia landscape that we all operate in now. So hence why I think a more of a program around trusted, authentic voices is something I want to set up really for next year's event.
Thanks, Heather. Do you have any key lessons from your career that you think might be useful for others to learn from?
You know what? I think I'm always learning, and I think that's probably that's probably one of the things. It's one of our values as a business, and I would say it's a huge thing is to stay curious. I am, as I've just said, it's changing constantly. This landscape we're in, it can be really quite overwhelming. You can, as communicators, we can just not know where to start sometimes. So I think, technology, human behavior, the expectations that customers have of us, they're all constantly evolving. So I feel like it's helped my career in a way because I've switched some sectors, and I think it's made me forced my hand to keep learning and keep growing. I don't expect my team to know it all, as in I think we can't be leaders who rely on our teams to know it. We do have to keep up, and I think staying curious is probably one of the most important things in communications, particularly with the way tech's changing. I think, as I sort of alluded to before, we've got to be really comfortable with complexity. That would be my second one. I've really seen our roles sit across multiple channels, disciplines, stakeholders. You've got media, you've got reputation, you've got brand, you've got culture. I think we really do need to consider the breadth of things when we're going into projects. And one thing that's been helpful to me is to learn that you do really need to consider every outcome that's possible. You have to be willing to push things on multiple channels and formats to get cut through. Really, like taking a piece, you have to really think about the multimedia aspects of it now. And that's something The Guardian does, spectacularly well, of course. But you have to be really comfortable about being agile, going back to your campaign perhaps and adapting the strategy if it's not working. That being comfortable with complexity piece, I think, is just something we have to accept as communicators. But my last one would be that relationships really matter still. I think we're all embracing AI, aren't we? Because we have to. We must embrace AI and allow it to help us. But it is human relationships, making the connections. I mean, in where I work here, it is absolutely vital to be the best communicators we can be, is to speak to people. It sounds so basic, doesn't it? But trust is the currency that makes everything possible. So for media, it is absolutely essential still to grow those good relationships. So that would be my last one. I think don't disregard building relationships, because of the speed at which we work, they still really matter.